Long before the first terrace was cut into the valley walls, before the almond groves marched in careful rows down to the riverbed, the people who would one day name themselves Heshani huddled beneath burlap roofs and watched the sky like worshippers watch an altar. Water meant life, and the sky was as fickle as any king. When the clouds withheld their silver, babies wailed with dust-choked lungs, and cedar beams cracked along hidden knots. It was in that first lean age, the elders say, that the storm harp appeared. The two mountains that cradled the valley, Karun to the east and Vedran to the west, are twins only by geography. Karun is a rugged wedge of granite, steeped in iron ore and refusing foothold to anything softer than a goat. Vedran rises more gently, dressed in terraces of basalt that glow violet at dusk. Between their shoulders, the valley forms a giant bowl, a place where any stray cloud is easily penned, but just as easily escapes if the winds so decree. Travellers who pass through notice how sound behaves oddly in that place. A shepherd's whistle on Karun can be heard perfectly on Vedran, while a drumbeat from the meadow seems to vanish straight up into the blue. The Heshani believed the valley had been shaped not by glaciers or faults, but by music. To them, the earth was an old instrument, and some notes still trembled in its bones. One night, during the drought of the first silence, an orphan boy named Idran climbed Karun chasing a story. He carried nothing but a slingshot and a bit of stolen, dried fig, yet in his mind burned a rumour he had overheard at a trader's fire, that the skysmith male had wed the windkeeper Selendre, and as a wedding gift he had strung a harp from mountain to mountain so that his bride could comb the clouds like unspun wool. Idran did not know if gods truly married, but he knew it had not rained for 7 turnings of the moon. Desperation makes children courageous. He decided that if a harp existed, perhaps a mortal hand could coax a single droplet from it. The mountain night was black as ink, and Idran's feet bled on the talus. Yet near midnight he discovered a line glimmering between the peaks, faint and tremulous as a spider's strand. He thought at first it was starlight caught in his lashes, but the fibre held its sheen when he blinked. The nearer he crept, the stronger the line hummed, filling his chest with a vibration too deep to be sound. Then came the storm, a sudden congregation of clouds, as if 12 horizons had marched and merged. Idran saw daggers of brilliance fling themselves between sky and stone, and each bolt plucked the strand so that an unthinkable chord shook the mountain. The ground leapt under him, boulders rattled like dice. Idran threw himself flat, palms pressed to his ears, but even through flesh and bone he felt the music. A roar, a weep, a laughter all at once. And then rain, not drizzle but torrents thick enough to drown fire. Idran scrambled back to the valley at dawn, soaked and trembling to spread the tale. From that night onward, the Heshani no longer begged the sky for mercy. They offered songs to the storm harp. Generations layered themselves atop that first story. Farmers swore by the harp's favour. Masons stamped its image on gate arches. Children shaped its twin peaks from barley dough at festival time. Every midsummer the valley held the vigil of strings, all torches extinguished, all voices hushed, while the folk sat in terraces, waiting to hear thunder pluck the unseen instrument. Sometimes the clouds obliged, sometimes they did not. Either way, the valley kept living. Yet as ages passed, gratitude thinned. The vigil became an excuse for lovers to slip into vineyards. White-haired priests who once walked barefoot up Karun to leave river stones at the windswept altar began sending apprentices in their stead. When the harvests came in fat and regular, the younger generation muttered that the old stories were just ways to keep peasants from sleeping late. The harp, they claimed, was merely static electricity singing across ore seams, and so, slowly but surely, reverence unravelled. Then came the second silence. Scholars dated it to the year the white crane nests were found empty, though in truth the hush had begun earlier, when the snows on Vedran failed to crown its ridges and the riverbed cracked like old pottery. For 3 summers and 2 winters, the rain forgot the valley. Almond hulls shriveled before they ripened. Olives rattled hollow on the branch. Wells drew up mud, then nothing. Even the wind went wandering elsewhere. Crops failed. Cattle died on their tether ropes, and the Heshani rediscovered fear. Among the few who still remembered the depth of older obligations was a young ink keeper named Leora. She worked in the repository of words, a domed hall carved into the valley's northern escarpment, where she copied border treaties and seed tallies onto reed parchment. Leora's mother had been keeper before her, and her grandmother before that. So she grew up listening to myths the way other children listened to lullabies. When she was small, she had pestered her grandmother for the full account of Idran's discovery. How many lightning strikes, how fierce the rain, what the music felt like inside the ribs. Her grandmother had smiled, eyes gone shiny with memory. Some things cannot be written, she had whispered. They must be carried in the blood like iron. Now, watching clerks tally famine figures and physicians ration willow bark, Leora decided the time for copying words was past. If Idran could climb the mountain as a barefoot orphan, surely she could as a grown scribe. And if the gods had turned away, perhaps they could be coaxed to look again. She prepared, not with weapons, but with questions. In the oldest logbooks she found fragments. Strings of wind hair, anchored by star-forged spikes. Must be played with thunder, or not at all. She hunted further, blowing dust from clay shards etched in an alphabet so archaic it slanted like grass in wind. One shard depicted a rod holding aloft a 5-point fork. Beside it was the glyph for calling. Elsewhere she uncovered a lament written by a nameless hermit. The harp sleeps because no heart dares beat in tempo with the storm. Leora puzzled over that phrase until she dreamed of it, literal hearts, exposed, throbbing against chords of light. She spoke with blacksmiths about metals that welcomed lightning and with shepherds who knew secret gullies where updrafts sparked even on cloudless days. Each encounter fed her resolve until, on the eve of the spring equinox, she shouldered a pack lined with goatskin, strapped a slender copper shaft across her back, and began the climb up Karaun. Karaun does not forgive haste. Its slopes tilt past vertical in places, and the rock breaks like stale bread under careless boots. Leora climbed anyway, gritting her teeth as shale peeled from the mountain in scabs. 3 days she ascended, finding purchase where lichen dared grow, sleeping in crevices no wider than a coffin. On the 4th dusk she reached a knife-edge ridge where the world suddenly opened. The valley behind her looked like a child's toy map. Vedran loomed across an abyss, charcoal dark, almost close enough to touch. And there, spanning the chasm silent but terrible in beauty, hung the storm harp. Its strings were not 1 but 13, each a slightly different hue, pearl, mercury, chrysalid green, dusk rose, and shades for which mortal tongues have no name. They did not sag, they did not sway. They cut the air in flawless lines, a geometry so perfect it seemed above nature. At their midpoint, Leora saw motes of lightning caught like fireflies in jar glass, flickering, waiting. She approached the first anchoring stone, a block of crystalline black ore fused to the bedrock as if melted there. From it jutted the star-forged spike of the legends, thick as her thigh and etched with glyphs that pulsed faint lavender when she neared. The runes resembled those on the clay shard, but here they glimmered alive, flexing like muscle under skin. She reached out a trembling index finger and touched the metal. Chill shot through her veins, then warmth, then something beyond temperature, a sense of width, as though her mind widened until it could hold an entire sky. Her heart drummed in her ears, matching a pulse she felt under the spike's surface, and she understood. The harp was not dead. It was waiting for a conductor. Night gathered. Somewhere in the valley, children cried for water, and orchard keepers scrawled in ledgers the debts they would never repay. Leora fixed the copper shaft into a joint on her pack, letting its 5-tined head rise above her like an antler. She recalled the final line of the hermit's lament, "No heart dares beat in tempo with the storm." Very well, she thought, let mine. She stepped onto a narrow outcrop directly beneath the lowest string. The air stank of ozone, though no clouds yet threatened. She breathed once, twice, and began to sing, not words, but vowelless tone. Something between lullaby and dirge. Her voice was thin at first, fragile against the wind whipping the pass. But she poured into it memory. Her mother's warm, ink-stained hands guiding hers along a reed. Her grandmother's scratchy stories by firelight. Fields once green with wheat tassels, laughter of children splashing irrigation ditches. The melody thickened with these images, gaining weight like a river gathering tributaries. Above, the strings quivered. A tremor crawled through the mountains. Vedran coughed a plume of dust from an unseen cleft. Leora lifted her copper staff, pointing it toward the sky, and her song rose with it, higher, sharper, until it pierced even the wind's howl. The first cloud unfolded directly overhead, a bruise on the stars. Others hurried from every compass point, colliding, nesting, multiplying. Leora felt hairs stand on her arms, her teeth buzzed, static breathed hot against her scalp. Then lightning cracked. It struck her staff with a scream of molten air, surged down the shaft and leapt into the harp strings. 13 notes detonated at once. Notes, yes, but also colors, shapes, moments. Leora's eyes saw sound, flocks of shattered mirrors, rivers curling upward, faces of ancestors she had never met. Her body lifted from the rock yet did not fall. The cord held her suspended in a cradle of vibration. The air itself turned fluid, thick with wetness that had not yet become rain. A second bolt arrived, and a third, each plucking new combinations. Minor sevenths of grief, perfect fifths of awe, barbaric tritones that tasted of iron and peach blossom. The valley below lit up as if dawn arrived in hammer strokes. On every rooftop, Heshani eyes widened. A toddler reached for the horizon and giggled, for the lightning spelled her name in loops of fire. And then the clouds broke. Rain fell in sheets, so heavy they seemed to possess gravity of their own, slapping dust into instant mud. Dry wells burped, then overflowed. The riverbed filled like a lung, exhaling frogs that had buried themselves months earlier. Windmills that had been locked for lack of breeze whirred themselves into splinters. People stumbled from their homes to taste the sky, mouths open, weeping. But on the mountains, the song was not yet finished. Leora felt the harp exploring her, threading its music through sinew and marrow. Each drop of her blood offered a note, each memory an echo. She understood that the harp was both instrument and player. The lightning was simply a bow drawn across cosmic strings, but the true resonance required a living heart to anchor it, to declare, "Here is sorrow, here is hope. Let this be shaped into sound." Idren had unknowingly served that purpose once. Now it was her turn. Could she withdraw? Possibly, if she cast down the staff and cowered behind stone. But the valley would hunger again, and the harp might sleep another 100 years. She made her choice. Her song shifted. She let go of individual memories and instead sang the valley itself. Each leaf, each thatch roof, each pebble rattling down an arroyo. She sang the unborn children who would walk orchards not yet planted. She sang lightning too, telling it that it was not a destroyer but a midwife. The storm responded, softening its roar into rhythm. Rain thinned to a steady patter, gentle enough for seedlings to drink without drowning. Thunder rolled back, content. At last the strings dimmed, returning to their moonlit whisper. Leora's feet found rock again, the staff cooled in her hand. She expected exhaustion, perhaps charred flesh, yet she felt lighter than when she began. The copper rod, however, had fused to her palm, its tines curled like withered fern. Where skin met metal, a new pattern shone, runnels that glimmered lavender, identical to the runes on the star-forged spike. She knew what that meant. She was linked now. The harp had taken her in. She could never fully leave. The thought frightened her, but deeper still it comforted. Leora descended Vedran's gentler slope, for the pass had cast her in that direction. At dawn she entered the valley, hair matted with rain, eyes glowing faintly like storm cloud edges at sunrise. People knelt, though she did not ask it. She drank from the river she had revived, and spoke 5 words. "Tend your gratitude or starve." Then she walked on, to no one knew where. That is where written records end, but myths do not require ink to spread roots. They say she roams the high crags still, a silhouette against flashing skies, her staff now grown into a pillar of lightning itself. When summer grows lazy and clouds drift away, travellers spot sparks dancing along the peaks hours before actual storms arrive. They claim this is Leora, tuning the strings, reminding the gods and the valley alike of their covenant. The rains follow, never so brutal as that first return, but firm enough to keep thirst at arm's length. In autumn, when children help thresh the barley, the elders point to the thunderheads folded behind Karuun and teach a chant said to echo Leora's first melody. The children grin, belt the nonsense syllables at the sky, and some swear they hear faint answering chords, like faraway bells underwater. There are, of course, skeptics. A newer school of natural philosophers argues that the storm harp is merely magnetized vapor resonating against geological faults. They point to barometric charts, to the valley's peculiar topography, to iron deposits in Karuun's spine. They do not deny the droughts nor the storms. They simply label them differently. Yet even the scholars hesitate to cross the ridge when the sky flickers slate blue. One professor, returning from a survey on Vedran, reportedly saw letters spelled in lightning near midnight. "Careful, dear pupil, some strings snap back." The harp itself is invisible to those who look with only eyes. Climbers have returned shaking their heads, claiming the gap between mountains is empty. Yet every so often a muleteer returning from the salt flats notices a humming in the canyon, or a potter on the night shift glances up to find her kiln shadows vibrating to an unplayed chord. Such moments weave another filament into the myth's enduring fabric. Of Idran nothing remains but a cairn on Karuun's lower slope, where hikers leave copper nails as tribute. As for Leora, some insist she slipped back into ordinary life, married, had children and died in grey old age. Others insist she became wind herself, one of Selendre's handmaidens, combing the sky. The repository of words keeps an empty alcove where her scrolls should lie. Every spring equinox the librarians dust it, light a single oil lamp within, and let the flame burn unattended until it gutters of its own accord. For now, that is enough. Ask any Hashani elder why rain falls when lightning sings between the peaks, and they will not lecture on convection or humidity. They will tell you a story of a boy who found music in terror, of a woman who traded her heartbeat for an unending chord, of mountains that dared hold the instrument of a god. They will tell you that gratitude is a sound, and that forgetting it makes the world go silent. And when thunder rolls, even far away, you might see them pause mid-conversation, tilt their heads and smile, listening not for violence, but for a harp being strummed across the sky.